Hello, my name is Frank Mascarich. I am a PhD candidate from the Autonomous Robots Lab at the University of Nevada, Reno. I will be presenting our work on autonomous distributed 3D radiation field estimation for the characterization of nuclear environments. Environmental gamma contamination is caused by the byproducts of multiple industries. First, roughly 11% of the world's electricity is produced from nuclear reactors, which generate highly contaminated waste products. Additionally, nuclear weapons programs over the last 80 years have also produced large quantities of contaminated waste, as well as facilities in which those weapons were developed. The mitigation of these facilities and the disposal of their waste continues to be a major challenge across the world. Furthermore, the mining of heavy metals, including uranium, produces radioactive waste in the form of tailings, which is material that is not profitable enough to refine, yet still contains significant quantities of radioactive material. Such tailing piles can be found at abandoned mine sites across the western U.S. Finally, the development of research and medical isotopes necessarily also produces contaminated waste and facilities requiring cleanup and mitigation. Such sources may be of arbitrary shape and highly variable in intensity, which renders previous work that assumes a single source or a known number of sources inapplicable. Gamma radiation in particular is detected and measured using a variety of tools. In this work, we have chosen to use a Psionics V10B10 scintillator, which features a cesium iodide crystal. This detector was chosen due to its low weight, low power consumption, and sensitivity in relatively weak fields. Scintillators respond to incident gamma radiation by illuminating a crystal material. This illumination, or scintillation, is amplified by a silicon photomultiplier before being converted into an electrical pulse. Gamma radiation measurement is governed by Poisson statistics, as it is the count of a number of events over a period of time, typically measured in counts per second. The number of counts per second is dependent on the size of the crystal and the pulse counting circuitry employed. Therefore, a calibration procedure, detailed in our previous work, is used to convert the measured counts per second to standardized units, in this case microrem per hour. One critical property of Poisson distributions is that their variance increases with their mean, resulting in increasingly noisy measurements as the radiation field intensity grows. The intensity of the observed gamma radiation is governed by the inverse square law, requiring close proximity to weak sources in order to accurately measure and localize them. First, we will define the problem to which this work applies. We seek to autonomously derive an estimate of the spatial distribution of gamma sources within an unknown environment. This can be split into two subproblems. First, given a set of sequentially collected measurements, estimate the field intensity across the known parts of the environment. Second, given the previously derived radiation field estimate, find a path from the current position to the point in the environment which would be the most informative for the radiation mapping task. Our proposed 3D radiation field mapping method operates over a 3D discretized grid and takes place in three phases: estimation, propagation, and curiosity. It should be noted that for visualization purposes, we depict a 2D slice of the discretized map in this representation. To visualize the method, the figures on the right show a subset of the discretized grid. Measurement points are indicated by blue circles, estimated means are represented by larger green circles, the derived gradients are represented by red arrows, and the current iteration's derived path is shown as yellow arrows, terminating at a pink X. First, the estimation phase iterates over each cell in the map. For each cell which has a sufficient number of measurements, the method gathers the readings present in the cell of interest, here denoted as Cijk, as well as those readings in the neighbors of Cijk. Using the intensity and position of these measurements, the method derives an estimate of the mean and the gradient present at cell Ijk using linear regression. Due to the fact that the sources are assumed to be distributed and may vary in intensity, the field can be approximated as a large number of small point sources, each following the inverse square law for their intensity, and a Poisson noise model for the noise of an associated measurement. By aggregating the noise terms and assuming a locally smooth spatial variation of the field intensity, the field can be approximated by multiple local linear regressions. The method then derives independent confidence metrics for the mean and the gradient. The gradient confidence is derived using Shannon entropy, resulting in cells with a large spatial distribution of measurements having higher confidences in their measurement. The mean confidence simply depends on the number of measurements used to calculate the mean. The next phase, propagation, takes place over a carefully dictated order for both the mean and the gradient. Each cell is assigned to a layer, where layer 0 indicates a directly measured cell. In the case of the mean layer, this means that the cell has more than 4 measurements. In the case of the gradient layer, this means that the cell has more than 4 measurements whose positions are linearly independent. Successive cell layers are assigned to unmeasured cells neighboring those previously assigned to a given layer. Finally, the cell order is derived by starting with cells belonging to level 0 and progressing to their neighbors. Once the cell ordering has been derived, each cell is assigned a propagated gradient. For those cells with a measured gradient, the propagated gradient is assigned to that which was measured. Unmeasured cells are assigned a propagated gradient by using the weighted average of the propagated gradients of neighboring cells belonging to a lower layer, weighted by their gradient confidences. Mean propagation takes place in a similar manner. However, unmeasured cells are assigned the weighted average of their neighbors' mean contributions, which is a factor of the propagated mean, their propagated gradient, and the distance from the neighbor to the cell of interest. This averaging is similarly weighted by the neighbor's mean confidence. Finally, mean and gradient confidences for unmeasured cells are assigned as the average confidences of the utilized neighbor's respective mean and gradient confidences. In the curiosity phase, each cell is assigned a curiosity metric. This metric is a factor of the propagated mean of that cell and the propagated gradient confidence. This results in higher quantities of curiosity in areas which are unmeasured and have a strong propagated mean. This phase then finds the cell which maximizes the curiosity over the entire grid and finds a path to this cell. The path is then augmented with intermediate waypoints to provide a greater variance in the collected measurements, and therefore more accurately derive an informative gradient. To demonstrate the proposed mapping and planning methods, a small collision-tolerant aerial robot was developed named RMF Gamma. This robot features a carbon balsa frame, allowing it to tolerate small collisions in narrow and confined environments. A RealSense T265 employs visual inertial odometry to provide localization, and a PMD Picoflex time-of-flight 3D camera provides depth measurements to acquire a more accurate reconstructed map of the environment. All processing, including control, planning, mapping, and localization, takes place entirely on board the robot using a Kostas Vim3 single-board computer. This computer is equipped with 4 Cortex-A73 cores and 4 GB of DDR4 RAM, while a PixRacer R15 autopilot is integrated to perform low-level control tasks. The robot is also equipped with the aforementioned cesium iodide scintillator, as well as custom-designed pulse-counting circuitry, designed to minimize weight and power consumption. The custom pulse-counting circuitry is composed of a 32-bit, 180 MHz microcontroller interfaced with an array of 32 comparators. The microcontroller reads the outputs of the comparator array and reports the pulse counts as well as the pulse heights to the high-level processor over USB at a rate of 10 Hz. The total weight of RMF Gamma, including the battery, is 540 grams, while the radiation subsystem of the robot weighs a total of 18 grams. 2 experiments are presented to demonstrate the mapping and planning methods on board the presented aerial robot platform. In both experiments, actual gamma radiation sources consisting of low-intensity uranium tailings are placed in the environment. In this first experiment, the robot follows the derived curiosity path, quickly locating both sources. Once these 2 sources have been sufficiently measured, the robot then proceeds to further unmeasured parts of the environment, searching for additional sources. A slice of the derived radiation intensity and gradient field are depicted at a height of 0.25 meters. This slide shows the progression of the radiation map over the course of the first curiosity-based experiment. The plots show 4 instances of the experiment, depicting RMF Gamma's path in pink, the derived propagated gradients with red arrows, while the propagated mean intensity field is shown in the background of the plot. Note that both of the radiation sources are found within the first 2 minutes of the flight. The true positions of the radiation sources are further depicted as green circles. This slide depicts the final radiation intensity and gradient field. The gradient arrows are colored by their corresponding cell's propagated mean, while the robot's trajectory is shown in pink, and the propagated mean at a height of 0.25 meters is depicted as a height map. The true position of the radiation sources are included as green cylinders. In the second experiment, the robot follows a fixed grid trajectory to demonstrate the advantages of using the presented curiosity metric. The waypoints in the grid are separated by 1, 0.65, and 1 meter on the x, y, and z axes respectively. Following this path leads the robot to spend a much greater proportion of its endurance in the background areas of the map. This slide presents the progression of the radiation mapping algorithm throughout the fixed grid trajectory. Once again, the gradient arrows are colored by their corresponding cell's propagated mean, while the robot's trajectory is shown in pink, and the propagated mean at a height of 0.25 meters is depicted in the background. Note that the first source is found after nearly 2.5 minutes, while the final source is correctly localized after more than 3 minutes. This slide presents the final derived radiation field intensity map from the fixed grid trajectory. The height map shows the propagated mean at a height of 0.25 meters, while the green cylinders depict the true location of the radiation sources. To conclude, this work presents a new method for mapping radiation fields in 3D without making any assumptions with respect to the distribution of sources or their intensity. An autonomous path planner is presented, which is specifically tailored to maximizing the radiation information gain, thereby improving the derived result of the mapping framework. A collision-tolerant aerial robot platform was detailed, capable of deploying both the proposed planner as well as the mapping framework. Finally, 2 experiments demonstrate the feasibility of the proposed approaches using real gamma radiation sources. Thank you for attending the presentation of our work on autonomous distributed 3D radiation field estimation for the characterization of nuclear environments.